잠깐만. 야 이거 싸면 나 죽어야 되는 거 아니야? 약간 찐득거리는 것 같아.
재밌다. 아니 이거 보기 힘든 이. 와.
야, 이거 찐득해.
와 형님 한번. 지금 일단 쏠 때도 다 쐈거든요. 와.
와.
오늘 재수가 좋았다.
야.
몇 cm짜리야?
아주 일단 저에게 주세요. 내가 가져야 돼. 한 마리 더 잡아야지.
잠깐 이 죽은 거 아니죠? 죽은 거 아니죠?
죽은 거 아니죠?
이제 죽어가요. 이거 딱 누르니까 이게 살짝 눌러줘야 되는데 너무 심지.
아니 빠져나갈까 봐요.
괜찮아요.
먹물 엄청 잡네.
자, 하나 더 봅시다.
하마 어디 있어?
아까
찾아봐요.
저쪽으로 갔는데.
잠깐만.
와 진짜 대박이다 진짜. 와.
아니 근데 신성 대박.
잘 잡죠?
어떻게 잡아?
잘 잡죠?
어신이네.
와 이거 깜짝 놀랐네.
야. 아까 분명히 이쪽으로 갔는데? 이게 잘못.
여기 왔다.
여기다.
어디? 오우.
도망가면 안 돼. 어디 갔어?
어디? 오우.
도망가면 안 돼. 어디 갔어? 오, 야, 빨라. 아우. 야.
야 먹물 엄청.
어디 갔어?
형.
열로 뭐해, 보세요. 아, 잡혔다.
코너에 먹어.
야, 이쁘다. 형님, 먹물 조심.
색깔 변하는 거 봐. 색깔 변하는 거 봐.
와.
색깔 변하는 거 봐.
네, 먹물 조심.
색깔 변하는 거 봐.
바로 넣으세요. 죽어.
자 어쨌든
이쁘다.
난 지금 방금 신성 씨 때문에 잡은 거예요. 다 몰아줘가지고. 궁지 벽으로 몰아가지고. 우와. 어디?
오징어 새끼.
어디?
여기 문에 오징어 새끼.
오 대박.
와, 진짜 귀엽다. 와.
아 진짜 무징오징어 새끼야.
네. 도망갈 때가 하얘져요. 도망갈 때. 귀여워. 귀여워.
여기 이런 돌 밑에 문어가 있는 거예요?
예.
우와. 괜찮으시겠어요? 아니 지금 문어가 나왔는데 잘 찾아봐야 될 것
야, 이거
같은데요?
먹물 뭐야 이거?
또 있어요? 또 있어요?
야,
어디?
또 있어.
또 있어?
어디 있어?
여기 있다.
여기 또 있어.
아니 뭐 이렇게 있는 거야? 우와.
오. 형님 잡아. 오. 야. 와 이거. 힘 좋은 거 봐. 오. 빨리 가서 먹어야 되는 거 아니야? 얘네들이 서로 먹기 전에
회도 먹었죠?
지금 빨리 회 떠야 돼요.
회떡 먹었죠?
예.
회떡 먹었죠. 배고판?
예. 폭삭 소가수다.
폭삭 속았다. 먹으러 가게 맛이.
먹으러 가기 맛이.
먹으러 가게 맛이.
가기 맛이. 가기 맛이.
네, 먹으러 가게 맛이.
어렸을 때 아버지가 클래식을 좋아하셔서 자연스럽게 공연장을 이제 가족들이 다 같이 가게 되었는데, 그때 포피아노 연주를 제가 실제로 가서 봤었는데 그때 이제 너무 멋있다 생각이 들어서 부모님께 피아노를 하고 싶다고 졸랐습니다. 저조차도 누군가의 연주를 보고 이렇게 피아니스트를 꿈꿔왔듯이 누군가도 제 연주를 듣고 다양한 감정을 이렇게 느꼈으면 좋겠어요. 어쨌든 저는 21세기 사람이니까 21세기 트렌드를 또 이러면 안 될 것 같아서 간혹은 또 가요나 팝송도 많이 들으려고 노력하고 있고요. 그러다가도 또 이제 다시 클래식으로 돌아오게 되더라고요. 그냥 클래식 음악은 진짜 어떤 시대에 들어도 누구나 공감할 수 있다고 생각을 해서 그래서 클래식 음악이 제일 마음에 와닿는 것 같아요. 지나바카오 콩쿠르에서 특히 2라운드 연주가 저는 항상 기억에 남는 게 너무 무서웠어요, 사실. 한 음만 치는데 다음 음이 뭐였는지 기억이 안 날까 봐 너무 두렵더라고요. 악몽을 너무 많이 꿨었고 연습을 하는데도 불구하고 끝까지 안 되는 음악적인 패시지라든지 테크닉적인 패시지들이 있는데 그게 무대 위에서 정말 무의식적인 세계에서 갑자기 해결이 되는 경우가 있더라고요. 그랬을 때 이제 희열을 확 느끼는 것 같아요. 제가 지금 공부하고 있는 곡들, 즐겨 연주하고 있는 곡들이 사실 클래식 음악을 처음 접하는 분들에겐 익숙하지 않은 곡들이지만 지금 제 나이에 가장 잘 표현할 수 있는 음악이라고 생각을 해서 그런 레퍼토리를 준비를 하고 있는 거니까 같이 즐겨주시고 같이 공유해주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump is warning countries against backing away from recently negotiated trade deals with Washington, threatening that they could face even higher levies. This follows last week's decision by the Supreme Court that struck down the reciprocal tariffs. North Korea's biggest political event is currently underway, but so far the regime has not sent any direct message to Seoul or Washington. The regime did announce this morning that Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of the regime's leader, has been promoted to a department head within the ruling Workers' Party. South Korea has won a key round in its legal battle against U.S. hedge fund Elliott Investment Management that reverses an international court's order in 2023 to pay more than $100 million in damages over the 2015 merger of two Samsung affiliates. We begin this morning in the United States, where President Donald Trump is warning of even higher tariffs after the Supreme Court struck down much of his earlier trade agenda, throwing global deals into uncertainty. The comments come as the president is set to defend his policies in his first State of the Union address of his second term. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that countries attempting to play games with recent trade agreements could face even higher tariffs following a Supreme Court ruling that struck down many of his sweeping global levies. Last week, the court blocked the bulk of tariffs Trump imposed under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, saying the law did not authorize the president to enact such measures. The ruling has created uncertainty worldwide as governments reassess the status of trade deals negotiated in response to those tariffs. In response, Trump announced a new global tariff initially set at 10%, but which he said would increase to 15% using a different legal authority. The new measure, with some exemptions, is scheduled to take effect on Tuesday. The European Union suspended the ratification of a trade deal reached over the summer on Monday, while India announced it would postpone talks aimed at finalizing a recent agreement. On social media, Trump cautioned that any country seeking to use the court's decision to retreat from prior commitments would face steeper tariffs than previously agreed. Meanwhile, President Trump is set to deliver the first State of the Union address of his second term Tuesday night before a joint session of Congress. The annual speech will outline his budget priorities, assess the economy, and set out key domestic and foreign policy goals. The address comes at a politically sensitive moment following the Supreme Court ruling in a recent shooting involving immigration enforcement officers in Minnesota. Observers expect Trump to double down on his hardline trade and immigration policies as he looks to energize supporters ahead of the November midterm elections. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Interim Chief of Coupang Korea, Harold Rogers, appeared before the U.S. House of Representatives on Monday for a closed-door deposition amid controversy over a massive data breach. Rogers testified for about 7 hours before the House Judiciary Committee in Washington in a session that could lead to follow-up legislative action. On his way to testify, Rogers declined to answer reporters' questions about what he would say during the session or whether he had any messages for Korean consumers. After the testimony, Coupang's parent company, Coupang Inc., released a statement expressing concern over the situation and said it's continuing efforts to seek a constructive resolution. And South Korea has won a key round in its legal battle against U.S. hedge fund Elliott Investment Management over the 2015 merger of two Samsung affiliates. The dispute stems from a 2023 ruling by the Netherlands-based Permanent Court of Arbitration, ordering Seoul to pay $107.8 million in damages and interest stemming from the controversial merger of Samsung C&T and Seoul Industries. Elliott was a shareholder in Samsung C&T at the time of the 2015 merger. The government challenged the decision in London, arguing the tribunal lacked jurisdiction under the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. Although Britain's High Court initially dismissed the case, the Court of Appeal later sided with Seoul and sent it back for review. Meanwhile, North Korea's 9th Workers' Party Congress entered its 6th day on Tuesday, and as of yet, there have been no messages directed towards Seoul or Washington. Meanwhile, Kim Yo-jong, the sister of the regime's leader, was promoted to a department head within the ruling party. Our Park Gun-woo has more.
Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, has been promoted from vice director of a department to the head of an undisclosed department at the ruling Workers' Party. According to North Korea's state-run Korea Central News Agency on Tuesday, the decision was made on Monday, the 5th day of the 9th Workers' Party Congress. Kim Yo-jong was also reinstated as an alternate member of the Politburo, the party's highest policy-making body, after having been demoted to an ordinary Central Committee member 5 years ago. The KCNA also announced the 5 members of the Politburo Standing Committee, the regime's highest decision-making body when plenary meetings of the party's Central Committee are not in session. Led by Kim Jong-un, the newly reshuffled body now consists of Premier Park Tae-sung, Cho Yong-won, and newly appointed Kim Jae-ryong and Lee Il-hwan. The change marks a generational shift in leadership as former senior member Choi Dong-hae was removed. Remarks by Kim Jong-un from Monday's meeting, where he said that no challenge or change in circumstances would be able to slow or stop the North's advance, were also reported. No specific messages were issued regarding external policies towards South Korea or the U.S., as his remarks focused largely on domestic issues. The current party Congress has now entered its 6th day, while the previous session lasted a total of 8 days. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
So the biggest political event in North Korea, its key party Congress, is currently underway. And held just once every 5 years, it's the 9th time the Workers' Party Congress has convened under the Kim family's decades-long rule and offers us a glimpse into the regime's political and military goals over the next 5 years. For more on this, we're joined today by Matthew David Jenkins, Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science at Gyeongsang National University. Professor Jenkins, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
So the regime, North Korea, has yet to send a clear message to Seoul or Washington at the party Congress yet. Some say Kim is being cautious ahead of the potential geopolitical shifts that could follow a meeting between Trump and China Xi in April. What's your take on this?
Yeah, sure. They haven't really said anything yet, and usually they typically do make remarks about the relationships with other countries, so it is unusual, as you point out. However, this party Congress has been a little bit less forthcoming on details compared to the last one. Details, for example, on specific economic policy targets and things like this. So it does kind of follow a pattern in terms of just being a little bit more hesitant on revealing the full details. So yeah, certainly they don't want to say anything that's going to trip them up later, depending on how the talks with Trump and Xi play out. And so I think it's just a bit of cautious strategic sort of positioning and sort of just waiting to see how that plays out to figure out what their next step is going to be.
I see, and Kim Jong-un has been re-elected to the top post of the ruling Workers' Party. What does this mean for the regime and Kim's leadership?
Sure. So this signals that Kim Jong-un is further consolidating power, right, and strengthening his leadership and reaffirming his authority and right to rule as the successor of Kim Jong-il, right. And I think we're going to see further changes in the reshuffling of the cabinet as he further consolidates power.
Right, and Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, has been promoted to a department head at the ruling Workers' Party. And North Korea also appears to be replacing political and military figures in Kim Jong-un's inner circle. Does this point to a generational shift, perhaps, and could it change the power structure within Pyongyang's elite?
Yeah, so age is important. Obviously, age is super important in terms of determining the party hierarchy, the military hierarchy, the government hierarchy, et cetera. But I think I would see this less as a generational shift per se, and more as a signal of Kim Jong-un consolidating power under people who are loyal to him, like people who owe their status and their power and the position to him rather than the previous successor. A lot of the older folks will have still ties to the previous leader, Kim Jong-il, right? And so that could create a potential for conflicts, right, between them and Kim. And so he wants to have people around him who are loyal to him, who owe their life to him, and therefore will be completely obedient and will not give him pushback. And so I think that's what this is really about. Kim Yo-jong is sort of his enforcer, and it makes sense that he would want to elevate position in order to further secure his power and make sure that there's no question about who is in charge and who makes the decisions, right, in this regime.
I see. There's also been a lot of tension on Kim Jong-un's teenage daughter, Chue, whether she might show up at the Congress or even get some sort of a formal role. South Korea's intelligence agency recently said she may be being groomed as a likely successor. What do you make of her growing public profile and possible influence?
Yeah, so I mean, she's been appearing at parades and things like this. So sort of, it does appear that he is grooming her as his successor. Nothing is formal yet. Nothing has been announced, and that's how it works for him too. His name didn't even really appear until much later in his life, right? And so I would expect a similar thing here. Although the NIS did say that he has chosen her as a successor, we don't have official recognition of that, and it's kind of weird because she was not at the party Congress. And so it is a bit odd, but that does seem to be the path that they're going. However, I think it's a little bit too early to really say that for sure. And it is also odd because, although there is obviously the bloodline, that's the most important thing, but there's also the sort of patriarchal culture, right, which focuses on the male lineage. And so that might be an interesting sort of thing to see how that plays out as we go forward here.
And this is the 9th Workers' Party Congress under the Kim family's rule, and many expect Kim to lay out new military goals. What should we be watching for?
Yeah, so certainly you'll want to be looking for any changes on stances towards North Korea's neighbors, towards the United States, Russia, China, right, and Southeast Asian nations as well. And I mean, obviously going to be looking for changes on nuclear policy, looking for new capabilities, hypersonic missiles, capabilities that enable it to strike at the United States or Japan or its other allies, right? Certainly want to be looking for that. In addition to changes in succession, right? As we said earlier, that will have important implications for its military policy as well, to see how that succession plan will be laid out, because that will affect the stability of the regime, right? And its strategic goals in the region.
Right, and we earlier talked about the April meeting between President Xi and Donald Trump. Do you think that could increase the possibility of North Korea's Kim Jong-un's meeting with President Trump? Do you think North Korea
certainly it's possible, depending on how it plays out, right? China has kind of an edge. Trump most of his economic policy is based on the tariffs, and that's kind of taken the blow from the U.S. Supreme Court, which has at least undercut one of the legal basis for his tariffs. And so China's got kind of an edge right now. There's, of course, the big issue would be Taiwan and how, what kind of a stance China is going to take on Taiwan. And, of course, the U.S. is probably not going to back down very easily on that. So it's certainly going to letting out a hand to North Korea might be another way to play the edge against China, given the U.S. is a relatively weak position. And so that could be in the cards, right, to sort of go around from the other side. And that's kind of what Trump likes to do, right? You would think he would take the obvious step, but no, he sort of goes around, maybe I'll make a sort of outreach to North Korea, and that could sort of undermine China's current strategic advantage.
Right, I guess we'll have to see how that meeting goes. All right, Professor Jenkins, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
Bank of Korea Governor Lee Chang-yong said that South Korea's economy is set for a remarkable rebound this year compared to 2025. Speaking at the National Assembly on Monday, Lee noted that despite uncertainties concerning U.S. tariff policies, domestic demand is recovering on strong consumer sentiment and export growth fueled by the semiconductor boom. He said inflation will likely remain stable near the bank's 2% target. However, he pointed to international oil prices, exchange rate fluctuations, and stock market volatility as key risks. He also warned of credit risks in vulnerable sectors, including self-employed businesses, amid ongoing concerns about financial imbalances from rising housing prices in the Seoul metropolitan area. And tickets for BTS' upcoming concert at Gwanghwamun Square were snapped up immediately after reservations opened. Online ticket reservations for the group's free comeback concert opened last evening at 8 p.m. Limited to one per person, the reservation provided tickets that assigns a seat in the designated seating area. Demand surged immediately after booking opened, and at one point, the online virtual queue page exceeded 100,000 people. The concert, set to take place on March 21st, marks the group's first comeback in more than 3.5 years and coincides with the release of the band's fifth studio album, Arirang, on March 20th. An unmanned firefighting robot was deployed for the first time in South Korea at the scene of a factory fire in Chungcheongbuk-do province, helping to extinguish the blaze. Our Cha Yun-kyung has more.
Amid towering red flames rising between buildings, a vehicle moves forward, spraying water through a high-pressure hose. The vehicle is an unmanned firefighting robot sent into the blaze instead of firefighters. This is the first time a firefighting robot has been deployed to a fire scene. 2 robots were deployed to the Eumseong fire. Robots assisted in suppression efforts in zones too dangerous for firefighters to enter because of collapse risks and extreme temperatures.
Robots did enter zones we couldn't get to. We believe there have been some achievements made.
The robot can be controlled remotely, but is also capable of autonomous navigation. It keeps its equipment cool in high-temperature environments through a self-protection spray system. It is also equipped with various advanced features, including high-temperature resistant, independently driven wheels. The unmanned firefighting robot was developed through a collaboration between the National Fire Agency and Hyundai Motor Company. The agency plans to routinely deploy the robots based on the results of their on-site operations starting next year. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. London police have arrested former British ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, on suspicion of misconduct in public office amid a political scandal tied to Jeffrey Epstein. Officers took the 72-year-old to a police station on Monday for questioning. 2 properties linked to Mandelson were searched earlier this month. The investigation comes after the U.S. Justice Department released emails in late January showing Mandelson's relationship with Epstein was closer than previously known. The emails indicated he shared information with Epstein while serving as a government minister in 2009. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who faces mounting scrutiny over Mandelson's appointment as ambassador to the U.S., has said Mandelson misled officials during the vetting process. Mexican security forces are still battling cartel gunmen amid retaliatory violence a day after the army killed drug lord El Mencho. Authorities say more than 70 people died in the attempt to capture the cartel leader and in the violence that followed. The toll includes 25 members of the Mexican National Guard, along with suspected cartel fighters and other victims. In retaliation for the death of El Mencho, cartel members erected more than 250 roadblocks across 20 states, set vehicles on fire, and launched attacks on security forces. Mexican officials say they have cleared the blockades, but operations continue as the country braces for further violence. A monster blizzard has brought parts of the U.S. Northeast to a near standstill, dumping more than a foot of snow and shutting down schools, roads, and airports. By 8 a.m. local time on Monday, New York City's Central Park recorded more than 15 inches of snow. Officials warned of more snowfall through the afternoon, with strong winds creating dangerous conditions. Flight tracking data showed more than 5,700 cancellations by Monday morning, disrupting travel at JFK, LaGuardia, Logan, and Newark airports. 7 governors have declared emergencies. New Jersey has suspended statewide rail and bus services, and officials have urged residents to stay off the roads. Activists placed a framed photograph of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor inside the Louvre Museum in Paris on Sunday, days after his arrest. The image taken by Reuters photographer shows Andrew sitting in a car as he left a police station on the day of his arrest last week on suspicion of misconduct in public office over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Activists attached a label beneath the photo reading, quote, "He's sweating now 2026. The anti-billionaire group Everyone Hates Elon were behind the stunt. They said they wanted to send a message that the former royal should face justice. Louvre staff removed the photo after about 15 minutes.
After a prolonged stretch of very dry weather, rain and snow are finally arriving nationwide today, helping to ease the dryness. Precipitation is forecast to expand to most parts of the country by the afternoon. Then until tomorrow, Jeju could see up to 80 millimeters of heavy rainfall. Gyeongsang-do province might get up to 40 millimeters, but the capital area will see spotty rain. Then the inland southern regions could see a significant amount of snow. Western parts of Gyeongsang-do province could get up to 10 centimeters of heavy snow, with a chance of a heavy snow advisory being issued. So extra precautions are necessary. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 6 degrees Celsius, Gwangju topping out at 7 degrees. Then Jeju Island will see wintry mix through the rest of the week. Meanwhile, temperatures will rise rapidly tomorrow afternoon, feeling more like spring.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
To set the facts straight. Get Korea right.
안녕하세요. 방크에서 활동하는 박지은 연구원입니다. 한글은 600년의 역사를 가진 우리나라 고유의 문자인데요. 한글에 대해 잘 모르는 분도 많고 또 잘못된 정보를 접한 분도 꽤 있더라고요. 사이버 외교사절 딴 방크의 일원으로서 제가 한글에 대한 올바른 정보를 전달해 드릴게요. 한글은 조선 4대 왕인 세종대왕이 1443년에 창제한 글자예요. 한글은 자음과 모음으로 구성되어 있는데요. 자음은 입술, 이, 목구멍과 같이 발음 기관의 모양이나 그 움직임을 본떠 만들었고요. 모음은 하늘, 땅, 사람을 본떠 만들었답니다. 한글의 창제 원리와 사용법을 써놓은 훈민정음 해례본은 1962년 대한민국 국보로 지정되었고 1997년 유네스코 세계기록유산으로 등재되었습니다. 창적이고 과학적이며 아름다운 문자인 한글, 한국인의 위대한 문화유산입니다. 한국 바로 알리기, 여러분도 함께 해주세요.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Tuesday, February 24th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Chuyeon.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Also, Brooke is with us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
For coming in. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So it's the second day of the work week, and today also marks a somber milestone, the 4th anniversary of the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war. It's a conflict that continues to shape global security and everyday lives far beyond the battlefield. battlefield. So Jiyeon, where does the Russia-Ukraine war stand today?
So as you mentioned, yes, today marks 4 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and the war is still ongoing with intense fighting continuing in eastern and southern regions. Cities and energy facilities remain frequent targets, especially during the winter month, and we have reported this several times in Arirang. According to various reports, the combined number of casualties on both sides is now estimated to have reached around 1.8 million people, though exact figures remain difficult to verify. Ukraine continues to rely heavily on Western military support, while Russia has expanded domestic arms production in order to sustain the war effort. But what began as a swift offensive has turned into a prolonged and costly war that is wearing both sides down and also reshaping Europe's security landscape.
Right, so 4 years on, what was once seen as regional conflict has fundamentally reshaped how countries think about security and preparedness. So do you have anything to add on this?
Well, those were some staggering numbers that Joo-hyun just presented us with, and it really is heart-wrenching to think that this has been going on for 4 long years. I truly cannot imagine what people are going through dealing with this every day. So I think I speak for all of us when I say that we hope for a resolution to come soon here. And on that front, the United States and other countries have been working to mediate the conflict. There have been multiple attempts at negotiation aimed at ending this war. However, both sides still seem to be quite far apart on key issues, namely territorial disputes. So for Ukraine, they are insisting on restoring territorial integrity, but for Russia's part, they are continuing to claim annexed regions. So with these core disagreements still happening, they have prevented meaningful progress towards a lasting peace deal or even a ceasefire. And that is why still 4 years on, we are talking about this war, and there does not seem to be an end in sight at the moment.
So despite ongoing diplomatic efforts, it sounds like the fundamental positions of both sides haven't really shifted, making a breakthrough difficult. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. The Russia-Ukraine war has now entered its 4th year, and it is the deadliest conflict Europe has seen since World War II. As the war drags on, other countries in the region are taking bold steps to ensure their security, and growing attention is turning to military conscription, once thought to be a thing of the past for much of Europe. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at whether conscription is making a comeback across Europe, how South Korea remains one of the most well-known conscription systems, and how young people today feel about mandatory military service. As we just saw in the video, the prolonged war is reshaping not only battlefields, but also how countries think about national defense. Across Europe, governments are now reassessing whether volunteer armies alone are enough in an increasingly unstable security environment. So, are we really seeing the return of conscription in Europe with the Russia-Ukraine war, Jiyeon?
Unfortunately, yes. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, several European countries have begun reconsidering conscription after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Most European nations significantly reduced their armed forces and shifted to all volunteer systems, believing large-scale war on the continent was unlikely. However, the war in Ukraine has fundamentally changed that perception. Governments now view territorial defense and military readiness as urgent priorities once again. So countries such as Croatia, Latvia and Serbia have either reinstated or expanded their mandatory service. These changes show that across Europe, security concerns are reshaping defense policy right now.
Right, so what was once seen like a Cold War relic is suddenly becoming a realistic policy option again, even in countries that moved away from mandatory service decades ago. And Germany in particular seems to be drawing a lot of attention with this newly introduced system. So Brooke, what exactly is changing in Germany's military service system?
So under Germany's new system, which is going to start this year, all 18-year-old men and women will receive a written inquiry asking about their willingness to serve. Now, women are not required to respond to to this inquiry, but men must reply. And for now, Germany does plan to rely on volunteers. But if that proves to be insufficient, then they are saying that they could very well amend the law and reinstate conscription. Now, moving on to other places, Denmark has already revised its law to require 18-year-old women as well to undergo conscription assessments. And Finland and Estonia are also considering expanding military obligations to include women as well. Now, we are going to talk about the differences a little bit more later, but here in South Korea, only healthy men are required to join the military. Women are allowed to volunteer if they wish, but it is not an obligation. In contrast, we're seeing now in several European countries, they are moving toward more gender-neutral systems, either by including women in their draft eligibility or actively debating whether this equal obligation should come into play at some point. I think this does reflect a broader shift in how military service is being defined in modern societies. I'm not sure if we'll see that make its way all the way to Korea, but it is an interesting topic that is seeing a lot of debate.
Right. It's also striking, especially the idea that governments are preparing legal pathways now, even if full conscription hasn't officially returned yet. And what's also notable is how this shift is expanding to include women, which marks a major cultural change for many countries. So how are younger Europeans reacting to the possibility of conscription coming back? Because that obviously impacts them the most.
Yes, obviously, yes. Well, so the group most directly affected by these decisions is Gen Z. In Germany, as you mentioned, shortly after the new military service framework was announced, tens of thousands of students took the streets in protest. Many young people view conscription as a demand to sacrifice their future for decisions made by older generations, especially by the government. For a generation already struggling with rising housing costs and job insecurity, including economic pressure, the policy feels like an additional burden to them. Some openly question why they should be asked to defend a system that they believe has not properly supported them before. So there's also some concerns that compulsory service could interrupt education and career plans at a critical stage of their lives. And while government argue that national security must come first, many young Europeans are asking whether fairness and opportunity are being equally considered. So for many young Europeans, security alone is not enough.
And that stance is also quite understandable and also shows how deeply this issue connects to generational concerns, not just security, but young people also have to think about the fairness and economic pressure as well. And for many young people, military service is being weighed against already difficult realities that they're facing, jobs and housing and even more. And this reaction, of course, doesn't appear to be limited to Germany alone. So are you seeing similar responses from young people in other European countries?
That's right. As we just saw in the footage, young people in Germany were protesting, and it's not just happening in Germany. There have been other demonstrations for similar reasons in different places. Looking at France, conscription at this point has only been just on the table as a discussion point. Nothing has been implemented as of yet, but even just talking about the idea has young people up in arms. They reacted very strongly to the idea of this change. So what happened was the government said that they were going to increase the defense budget in this year's budget plan. And in response to that, unions led by young workers organized protests. And their slogan was, "Strike to protect our pensions." So they are strongly in opposition to this defense budget because they think the budget should be going toward other problems like social welfare and retirement protections. Those are the priorities that they want the government to focus on. So I think, needless to say, if France were to actually seriously consider implementing conscription at this point, there would probably be significant backlash from their young people.
I think the reality is for young people, defense policy is no longer just a military issue, but a social and an economic one for many young people. So we also want to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, how should military service be organized? Here's what the results showed. So 53% support conscription for both men and women, suggesting growing acceptance of shared national defense responsibilities. Meanwhile, 36% favor maintaining an all-volunteer military military, reflecting continued support for professional armed forces. Only 11% believe conscription alone should apply to men alone, indicating declining backing for traditional male-only service systems. So what stands out here is that more people seem to be open to the idea of more shared responsibility, but the results also show there's no clear consensus yet, with a significant portion still preferring a professional volunteer military over mandatory service. So to get a first-hand perspective on this, we're going to talk to a young person from Germany, and that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Quentin, a college student from Germany. Hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, thank you to be here.
So, Quentin, what's driving Germany to consider a return to conscription?
I would say because of the security situation in Europe, it's becoming more tense in Europe, and we have not enough people in our army in Germany to fill the gap. I would say to fill this gap of the missing people in the army.
I see.
Yeah.
Then how are young people in Germany like you reacting to the idea of conscription?
Most of the people, I think, especially young people, they want not to be committed to the military service. They want to have the free choice to make to make their own sorry. What I'm trying to say, most of the people, especially young people, and I would say I would say the most young people are against the conscription because they want not to make this military service. They feel like missing from
That's all right. I understand what you're saying, that they want to feel free to make their own
I'm
decisions,
trying.
right?
My English is not the best. It's very. I'm a little bit nervous.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. My last question for you would be, what's your own personal take on military service being mandatory?
I think my own take on military service. I said people should make their own choice. People shouldn't be committed to make a service, and I think people should have especially young people should have the choice to make their own way on their life, and when they don't see that on training on a weapon to secure the country. People should make the choice to people shouldn't be committed to these acts. I would say, this is my take. I think people shouldn't be committed to be on the, how do I say, on the extreme situation like war to be drafted out and
I
must
think
protect the country.
I think a lot of young people. Right, yeah, and I think a lot of young people could relate to what you're saying. You know, the fact that it's becoming mandatory, you know, there's so many things that young people have to deal with now, like we talked about jobs and housing. So yeah, I think that's really relatable no matter where you're from. So right, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today, Quentin.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for my bad English.
No,
I tried my best.
You're great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So we just spoke with a college student from Germany about why the German government is reconsidering conscription, how younger generations are reacting, and his personal view on mandatory military service. And while this debate may feel new in parts of Europe, it's something South Korea actually has been living with for decades now. So for those who aren't as familiar, what does military conscription work? How does it look like in South Korea, Jian?
Well, Brooke mentioned a little bit earlier, yes, South Korea remains one of the most well-known conscription countries in the world. All physically fit men, including my two sons in the future, are required to serve, typically for about 18 months in their early 20s. And technically, the Korean War has never formally ended, as the two Koreas remain under an armistice rather than a peace treaty. That reality continues to shape a strong sense of security awareness in society because military service coincides with a crucial stage of education and career development. The issue remains highly sensitive among young men and their families, of course. However, according to a 2023 national survey on security awareness, only 14% of respondents said they would be willing to participate in combat if war were to break out on the Korean Peninsula. So this marks a steady decline from 23% in 2014 and 22% in 2020. At the same time, as you may know, South Korea's rapidly declining birth rate has raised concerns that maintaining the current troop levels may become difficult after 2030. Calls for a smaller elite volunteer force are growing now, and the debate is just beginning.
And that's quite telling. Even in a country where military service has long been seen as unavoidable, public willingness to actually fight appears to be declining. But of course, South Korea isn't the only model. Some countries have taken a completely different approach by relying entirely on volunteer forces. So the US is one of the best known volunteer military systems. So Brooke, how do young Americans view serving in the military these days?
Well, it's certainly different from how it's viewed here in Korea, where it's kind of seen as an interruption or an inconvenience. It's an obligation. But in America, it's seen as a very heroic choice. It is honorable and sacred and a sort of patriotic act to do for your country. So public perception of the military is generally pretty positive. You will be given a lot of respect as a veteran, and you also get many benefits such as education support through the GI Bill, health care, housing, career opportunities. I mean, the list goes on. And of course, this makes military service quite attractive. Even for young people who have dreams of doing something else in the future, it's a great jumping off point because it's entry level. You can go right in, get on your feet. You can get financial stability and good experience that will be viewed positively later on. And it's also a valid long-term career choice as well. Many people decide to do that as their chosen career path. So for those reasons, a lot of people want to volunteer. And I do want to add that my best friend is actually retired Navy, and she speaks very highly of the benefits that you can get from the military. In fact, she still has health care and access to military bases despite being retired. But she did want me to make this point, which is that we talk about America as a voluntary military system. But for a lot of people, it's not really a choice. It's their only way out. And so some people say that if America were to offer better livable wages and more affordable health care, then we would probably see fewer volunteers. So just another perspective to look at it. But overall, I would say that the voluntary military service brings in people that genuinely want to serve their country and also enjoy the benefits that come with it.
So that's a really interesting contrast. Military service there seems like less like an obligation, more like a career choice, or also opportunities as well. But regardless of whether countries rely on conscription or volunteers, the debate around military service is far from settled. So beyond conscription itself, what other controversies or debates are emerging around military service today?
Yes, you said far from settled. Yes, beyond reinstating conscription, several broader debates are emerging. One major issue is whether mandatory service should apply equally to us, to women, as some European countries, as we've mentioned, are already moving toward gender-neutral conscription. And another question is whether large standing armies are still necessary in an era of advanced weapons, cyber warfare, and drone technology. Critics argue that modern warfare relies more on technology and expertise than sheer troop numbers. So ultimately, each country faces difficult security realities, that is, and finding a balanced and country-specific solution, this remains the key issue, key challenge. And security choices now will shape the next generation.
It does look like it will be that way. So would you have anything to add, Brooke?
Yeah, some other controversies I'd like to point out would be individual rights and economic impact as well. We've been talking a lot today about the mandatory military service in Korea, and having been here for quite a long time, and I've spoken to many Koreans about this, a lot of them see it as something that infringes on their personal freedom and the right to choose their own career paths as well as their own timeline on that career path. It really is a giant swath of time that you cannot focus on your own plans. So it forces young people into this obligation during a formative time in their lives. And others also point out potential downsides for national productivity, because if you're pulling all of these young people into the military, then you have a smaller labor pool, and that can strain economies, especially in places like Korea where we have an aging society and low birth rates. So taking all of the youth and putting them into the military does strain the economy here as well. But on the flip side, proponents say that if you have conscription, it can bolster your national defense and also foster a sense of civic duty. I would say that's more of the American mindset, but obviously it varies by country, and it's a very nuanced and polarizing issue. People have strong feelings about it, as we've seen in the footage of protests today. So I think every country is going to handle it a little bit differently depending on their cultures, their ideals, and their values.
Right, so as wars and security threats evolve, countries around the world are once again rethinking how their military should be built. From Europe to Korea and the United States, each system reflects different histories, values, and social realities. But one question remains the same everywhere. Who should bear the responsibility of national defense in a changing world? The debate over conscription may look different in every country, but it's clear the conversation is far from over. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. When News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Chuyeon.
Thank you for having me, Sejin.
And also Brooke.
Always a pleasure.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoy a peaceful day ahead. We are News Generation.
Curious about what's special about K-content?
In recent years, Korean cultural content has taken the world by storm.
So, what's your favorite K-content? Movies, dramas, music, exhibitions?
Are you ready to take your pick?
Starting with globally acclaimed K-movies. It's no longer rare for Korean movies to receive awards at international film festivals. And we can't talk enough about the K-drama sensation.
It's not surprising that drama filming sites go on to become major tourist attractions.
When we are on the topic of K-pop, we can't leave out idol groups. They are the driving force of K-pop.
K-pop idol group members do not only have exceptional singing and dancing skills, but they have the looks too. I'm a huge fan.
I really like Korean underground music. These days, talented K-indie bands are recognized overseas as well.
Oh, and Korea also has a lot of music festivals. You can meet musicians of all genres at these events.
Exhibitions happen in Korea all year round.
I also enjoy going to the theatre. There's no shortage of musicals, plays, and performances to choose from. So keep an eye on the theatre scene.
Then there is K-design, blending traditional and modern elements.
K-fashion, leading trends.
K-beauty, which takes beauty to the next level.
K-content, receiving praise the world over. Watch it, experience it, and enjoy it.
저는 만 5살에 바이올린을 시작했는데요. 바이올린 소리를 워낙 좋아했어서 그